Hello, I'm Mark Mirando, National Program Leader in the Institute of Food Production and Sustainability. And today I'm going to be talking with you about conflict of interest, criteria, confidentiality, and research misconduct in the review process. So we will start off with discussing conflict of interest and then move on to confidentiality and finally research misconduct in the review process during this presentation. So conflict of interest criteria at NIFA are listed on this slide. So these criteria include all co-authors that an individual has had during the last 3 years. The lone exception to this 3-year co-authorship rule is for publications which have 10 or more co-authors if there is no other type of co-author that conflict of interest that exists between individuals that are co-authors. So this exception allows for co-authorship on review articles where the individuals are not collaborating or do not have any other type of conflict of interest. And it also allows for co-authorship on these large genome sequencing papers, which may have 50 or more co-authors, many of which do not collaborate or publish with some of the other authors on there. The second type of conflict of interest or second criteria is all collaborators during the last 3 years. The third conflict of interest type is for advisors and advisees. This is graduate advisors and advisees and postdoctoral advisees and advisors. And this conflict of interest lasts for the lifetime of the individuals. So I will add that the other portion of this is that it only applies to the major advisor. So for advisors who are on a graduate student committee, that conflict of interest does not persist for the lifetime of those advisory committees or for the student's lifetime. Another conflict of interest is one of institutional type, and so a reviewer, this occurs for any proposal with a PD, co-PD, or collaborator from the reviewer's institution. So a reviewer cannot review a proposal from his or her institution. And then the final conflict of interest criteria is anyone who stands to benefit from a proposal being funded. So if a reviewer is from the private sector and from a company who is providing a lot of supplies to a project, obviously they're going to benefit from that proposal being funded. So that would be a material conflict of interest that is not listed above. So the way conflicts of interest are identified take several avenues. We have, so as panel manager, prospective panelists should be asked if they or their significant other or partner are submitting a proposal to the program as either PD, co-PD, or collaborator. And when we say program, it means this specific program or panel for which they serve, not the broader program. For example, AFRI has many different programs, and an individual can submit to a different program and then serve on a panel for another program. So then applicants also identify their conflicts of interest for themselves as PD and for their co-PDs and collaborators, and they do this within the application. There's conflict of interest forms that list all the different conflicts of interest for each co-PD, collaborator, and themselves as PD, and the type of conflict of interest. And then the panel manager and national program leader screen these conflict of interest lists when assigning panelists and any ad hoc reviewers to the individual proposals. So ultimately, reviewers may not review proposals for which any conflict of interest exists. And if they are inadvertently assigned to a proposal which conflicts of interest exists and they identify it at a later time, then they must be removed from that proposal as a reviewer. And if it's a panelist, they must be replaced. And if it's an ad hoc reviewer, you may replace them, or you may decide that you already have enough expertise on that proposal, and replacement of the ad hoc reviewer is not needed. So a couple of situations which come up frequently regarding questions of whether a conflict of interest exists or not are identified in this slide. So there is no conflict of interest if the reviewer and the applicant had served previously on the same review panel, whether the same review panel for the proposal in question at this time or another review panel with NIFA or any other agency. So that's not a conflict of interest. There is no conflict of interest if the reviewer and applicant currently serve or have served together on committees of the same professional organization. And there is no conflict of interest if the reviewer and the applicant have submitted a chapter to a book co-edited by the other. So conflicts of interest are handled in the following manner. A panelist or significant other or partner of the panelist may not submit an application as PD or co-project director to the same program or panel for which they serve. Generally, they may not submit an application to the program they're serving, but we do have some programs which are very large and are split up into two panels, and those programs may allow a panelist to serve on one panel and have their proposal reviewed in the other panel, since the two are kept separate in the panel review for which they're serving is not influencing the outcome of their proposal in the other panel. But generally speaking, neither a panelist nor their significant other may submit an application to a program for which they are serving. For conflicts of interest that exist, the panelists must leave the room during discussion of any proposal where she or he has a conflict of interest. And a panelist may remain in the panel room during the re-ranking, but they must not enter into discussion of the proposal, of any proposals or para-proposals where conflict of interest exists. So we're going to switch now to confidentiality guidelines. So reviewers must hold information confidential for all applications. So this means reviewers may not copy, quote, or use material from any applications that are submitted that they may review or see during the panel review process. They must seek permission before allowing a colleague to review the proposal or help them review the proposal. You may have someone at your institution or someone you know that you think can provide some valuable insight into the proposal, and you want them to help you review the proposal. But before you do this, you must get permission from the national program leader to do this, and you must be able to provide them, the national program leader, with that individual reviewer or colleague's name so that they can check for conflict of interest on the proposal, and so that they then have a record of who else has helped to review. And then as a reviewer, you must destroy all applications, whether they're paper or electronic files, once the review process is complete. So in the review process, confidentiality includes all the applications and applicants. So even the fact that a certain individual has submitted an application to a program during any given fiscal year, that information is strictly confidential. The panel meeting dates are confidential. The panel membership, the names of the other members on the panel, is confidential. Panel review assignments, who are assigned to what specific proposal, that is all confidential. The panel discussion, different topics that are covered during the proposal review, all of that is confidential. And then the final rankings or preliminary rankings and final rankings, that is all confidential. Now, if we go back up to the second and third bullet on this list, so panel meeting dates, you may have to discuss this with your department chair or supervisor. And so that may mean revealing those panel dates to that individual, but they should be given the understanding that this is confidential, that you're revealing confidential information to them, and they need to keep that information confidential. Panel membership, this is strictly your service on panel. So you can self-identify at a later date that you're going to be on panel. Obviously, if you're requesting permission from your supervisor or department chair for service on the panel, you obviously have to divulge that information, but that's as far as you should go. This is obviously something that you may want to include on your CV for future reference, but it would probably be best, at least in the short term, to keep the years of service off of that information, off of that CV, or at least not make that public in the short term. What is not at all confidential is how we proceed with the overall review process. That is the NIFA process, the process that NIFA uses for review of proposals. And in fact, we have this a document on the web that describes how we proceed with the review process for our competitive grant programs here at NIFA. And finally, we'll move on to the third component of this talk and briefly discuss research misconduct and how this is handled in the review policy. The federal government issued a policy statement on research misconduct, which was published on December 6, 2000. And this applies to all federally funded research and proposals submitted to federal agencies for funding, including intramural research funded by federal agencies and extramural research supported by federal agencies and performed by research entities either within the federal government or outside the federal government. And research misconduct is categorized in one of three manners, and this includes fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. So fabrication is the making up of data or results and recording or reporting them. Falsification is manipulating research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results such that the research is not accurately presented in the research record. And plagiarism is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. So from the standpoint of a person plagiarizing their own ideas, then we don't consider that a concern in the review process, because they're not taking another person's ideas. It's the individual's own intellectual property, and so we're not concerned with self-plagiarism at all. So a finding of research misconduct requires, firstly, that there be a significant departure from accepted practices of the relevant research community. Secondly, that the misconduct be committed intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. And thirdly, that the allegation is proven by a preponderance of the evidence that's available. So a preponderance of the evidence means that proof of information that, compared with that opposing it, leads to the conclusion that the issue is more probably true than not. So it's not beyond all reasonable doubt, but it's that it's more likely to be true than not true, that research misconduct was had occurred. So, and then research record, as we mentioned on the previous slide, will include things like either electronic or hard copy versions of research proposals, laboratory records, progress reports or internal reports, abstracts, theses or dissertations, presentations, and journal articles. So that's what's categorized as a research record. So what happens if an allegation of research misconduct is made during the review process or during a panel meeting? So even if such allegation is made, applications must be reviewed as normal. Keeping in mind that an allegation of research misconduct is only suspected until it is proven. So if an allegation is made, then that allegation will be looked into using the scientific integrity process outside the panel review process. So those two need to be kept separate. So an allegation of research misconduct must not influence the review process or influence the outcome of the review. The problem here is that if an allegation of research misconduct is made and then it influences the review process and basically kills a proposal, and it turns out that that allegation was mistaken, there's nothing that can be done to rescue the proposal because it was ranked too low to bring back to where it should have been. So the best case is to evaluate it on its merits, and a proposal that's ranked highly and turns out that an allegation is made against it and which turns out to be true, that proposal will not be funded then. However, if the reverse is true, if an allegation sinks a proposal, then nothing can be done to rescue it if the allegation is incorrect. So if an allegation, finally, if an allegation is made by a reviewer, the panel manager and the NPL should replace that reviewer and declare them in conflict of interest for that proposal. And this is done in order to prevent that reviewer from influencing the review process, either intentionally or inadvertently. So the best situation is to just simply remove that reviewer from the proposal and then replace them with somebody else who is unaware of the allegation, and then move the review process forward. So if an allegation is made during the panel process and it is made out loud during a panel process, obviously the entire panel is going to hear about that allegation, or who's ever in the room and not out on conflict of interest is going to hear about it. So the only way to handle that is to remind everyone present that this is simply an allegation at the time, and that the review of the proposal must continue as normal and in a manner that is that of innocent until proven guilty style. However, you should avoid this by making sure panelists know ahead of time that allegations should be made privately to the panel manager or national program leader. So this should be done in a pre-panel orientation meeting or a pre-review orientation meeting. They should not bring these allegations to the attention of anybody during a panel meeting. Allegations made in the written record in PRS reviews will be redacted by the program from the version sent to the applicants, but the original review with the allegation will be left in our PRS system as part of the official record that it was made. So peer panel members may notice falsification, fabrication, or plagiarism, and they should bring this to the attention of the panel manager or national program leader if they do, so that this can be acted upon. And the procedure for acting upon this is in a Code of Federal Regulations, or 2 CFR 422, if you want to Google that and read more about it. And it is described in this Code of Federal Regulations titled "The Research Institutions Conducting USDA-Funded Extramural Research, Research Misconduct." And generally, when allegations of research misconduct are made, NIFA will allow the associated institution to respond to the allegation and provide that information to how NIFA write our own investigation and our own proceedings regarding any allegation of research misconduct. So as a panel manager, if you suspect research misconduct, then or are provided that information from a reviewer, then you should provide the name of the reviewer, the proposal number, and the specifics of the suspected research misconduct to the national program leader or to the NIFA research integrity officer, who will be named in the future. If you just provide it to the national program leader, then they will forward that information to the NIFA Research Integrity Officer for them to investigate. And if you notice above specifics of the suspected research misconduct, the suspected is underlined because this is just a suspicion or an allegation, and you must keep in mind it is that we're going to proceed with the review process as innocent until proven guilty, and that proven guilty may occur well after or proven guilty or proven innocent may be completed well after the review panel is completed. So it must not influence the proposal review and ultimate outcome of the rankings of that proposal. And so finally, if you have questions about anything on this presentation, I will encourage you to contact or communicate directly with your national program leader running the program, or the review or the team, your NIFA team of program specialists, program assistants, and supervisory program assistants. Thank you.